So the senior staff of the campaign did this long interview with Pod Save America, and we played one clip of it from David Plouffe this morning. I've listened to a bit of it, but not very much. But Dan Turntine on his flight, special flying correspondent, has listened to a lot of it. And there's an incredible tweet thread from a guy who I don't know named Ben Yellen, who listened to the thing and just was not pleased with what they say. Jen O'Malley Dillon and other senior officials, David Plouffe. Anyway, based on this Ben Yellen chap who seems very smart, and Dan Turntine and the parts I've heard, there's not a lot of confronting any weaknesses on the part of the candidate. And they're basically sticking with the line was they could never win because they didn't have enough time. And as I said before, if they didn't have enough time, she shouldn't have run. Or as this Ben Yellen chap points out, they should have gotten Biden out earlier. But they say the trans issue was never a big factor in their research. They've said that before other places. Anyway, I'm going to listen to the whole thing. But it sounds like a lot of Democrats, of a sample space of 2 very smart Democrats, don't find the things they said particularly comforting. If what you're looking for is a unvarnished appraisal of what happened. There's so much we could play, but we're going to play one soundbite from Jen O'Malley Dillon. Roll tape.
I am not media hater by any measure, and I think that, we women don't get far in life talking about double standards, so that's not the point. But I do think a narrative, 107 days, 2 weeks fucked up because of a hurricane, 2 weeks talking about how she didn't do interviews, which, she was doing plenty, but we were doing in our own way. We had to, be the nominee, had to find a running mate and do a rollout. I mean, there was all these things that you kind of want to factor in, but real people heard in some way that we were not going to have interviews, which was both not true and also so counter to any kind of standard that was put on Trump that I think that was a problem. And on top of that, we would do an interview, and to Stephanie's point, the questions were small and processy about
dumb.
They were not informing a voter who was trying to listen to learn more or to understand. And I'm not here to say that the whole system was focused on us incorrectly. I'm just saying, again, of the things we need to explore as we move forward as a campaign and as a country, that does a disservice to voters. And I think back and think we should have signaled more of our strategy early on about podcasts and who we were trying to reach. But we had a limited amount of time to reach the people we were trying to reach, and we were trying to go to them. But being up against a narrative that we weren't doing anything or we were afraid to have interviews is completely bullshit, and also took hold a little bit. And we just gave us another thing we had to fight back for that Trump never had to worry about.
All right. Again, there's more of it. I'll read you one of the texts from Dan, who's pretty far into it. It's frustrating. Listen, there are legit points they make, and they obviously are not going to crap on Harris on this podcast. But the elephant in the room, the candidate, hangs over their strategic and tactical decisions. They were very frustrated with the Democratic super PACs. So it doesn't sound like they said she wasn't a good candidate. Doesn't sound like they said she was too liberal. Doesn't sound like they said Trump had a good message. It sounds like a lot of other stuff. So I'll listen to the whole thing. Maybe I'll post on Twitter about it. So here's another thing they said. Put up my tweet. So David Plouffe apparently says in the interview that their polling never showed them ahead. Now, I don't know exactly if he said they were never ahead in a single state or what, but I assume that's what he means, because I know my friend David Plouffe does not care about national polling. Their internal polling never showed Harris ahead. Now, I reported that for weeks. And as this Poll Watch website or Twitter account points out, my evaluation of the internal polling was right. I appreciate the credit, but I wouldn't call it an evaluation. I would call it the reality of what all the Democratic and Republican polling I heard about showed that they were even or behind everywhere, not ahead. Now, what they said was surge of female voters and the ground game would put them in the lead. But that's just not, that's just not the way polling works.